Cendio, ThinLinc, and friends have the pleasure to host this webinar panel with you today. And the main topic is traditional versus non-traditional UNIX end users. So we already shared the details with you concerning the vision, the overview, and the abstract. So we don't need to read them, I suppose. Here we are. It's the estimated total time is 90 minutes, and with some 15 minutes for introduction, plus 45 to 60 minutes for the panel, and ending up with 15 minutes for Q&A. So, as our moderator, we have Robert Henschel, Director of Research Software and Solutions at Indiana University. Perhaps later Robert will present himself as well as the others. Pierre Osman as a panelist from Cendio. He's our Chief Technology Officer here and also can present himself later. Steve Moulton, we are still waiting. I didn't see if Steve is in the room now. Unix System Administrator at Oak Ridge National Lab. Greg Peterson, Senior Engineering Manager at Seagate Technology. And Anthony Moon, Engineer Global System Architecture at Technicolor. So perhaps now I transfer the microphone to you, Robert.
Sounds good. So I think the idea here is with the panel to basically go through three bigger topics. User support needs for ThinLinc as a product, customizations around the product, and the end user experience of the applications and desktops that are published through ThinLinc, and then talking a little bit about security. So the setup of the panelists will start a first round where I ask the three other panelists to do a quick intro on themselves and how they got started with ThinLinc as a product, and just a very brief overview of how you use the solution at your institution. And I'll do it at the end as well. And then we'll cycle through those three topics with some questions and have the panelists address those. And then at the end, we have some time for questions from the audience. If you have them, by all means, put them in the chat already. I'll go through them, and then if they are already related to some of the things we talk about, I'll fold them in as we speak. If you don't, thanks for everyone to be muted. And again, this should be an interactive kind of panel. So if you have specific questions, put them into the chat. So let's get started. Maybe we'll start with Craig. If you could do a brief intro for you, your role, and what you do with ThinLinc, and what kind of users you serve at your institution.
Okay. Good morning, and everybody. What we do at Seagate is obviously we build computer hard drives. My particular function is what we do for the SoC controllers on the hard drives. About 10 years ago, we started using Cendio as our main source for accessing the design environment for our chip designers. And, and that Cendio and ThinLinc really is the main connection to the back-end Linux farms. We have about 400 active users worldwide connected to an HPC development environment, submitting jobs for Verilog design, for place and routes, pretty much the entire chip building process. It's been very successful for us. Our previous product didn't meet what we needed as the OS started to change. And as we started to keep up with kind of patches and the configurations for the different OSs. So Cendio has really been able to fill that for us and become a really stable platform for the engineers to use and design the product with.
Thank you. That's a nice overview. Then on to you, Anthony, from Technicolor. Can't hear you.
I always do that. Sorry about that. So yeah, hi everyone. Anthony Moon with Technicolor. I've been with the company for 6 years accumulatively and 7 calendar years since 2014. So I'm in the systems role, and I was promoted to a new global role where I'm helping to adopt technologies. And one of those technologies is of course ThinLinc. We use that for our internet VDI systems. A little bit of history is back in 2014, we had to segregate our networks, like production and corporate. So we needed a way to remove internet from production. That's from most of our users are in production, they're artists. So we needed a way to air gap that internet access while still providing a means for them to ingest references or to watch YouTube or tutorials or to download stuff, or even in some cases, software developers, they need to pull in Git repos. So we've had to design a way to still provide them the tools and the services they need while maintaining that security. Initially, we went with alternative products. Be very careful not to mention it, but we were using another product, and it was okay, but it wasn't. We weren't entirely happy with the performance. Some bugs that came up, and it just wasn't very good. And after that, another project came along, and I decided to look at what else was out there, and I came across ThinLinc, and we were really impressed, and we decided to adopt that into any sort of internal VDI system we have. So we use it for accessing different sites across the world. We use it for deploying applications to Windows and OS X. And the biggest use case is probably our internet VDI system. We have 2,000 artists across the world who will use that on a daily basis. So yeah, and the feedback has been great. It's been a huge improvement over our last solution. So that's kind of like my history and my introduction, and yeah. Yeah,
thank you. I'll go next, and then I'll ask Pierre to talk a little bit about his role as CTO at Cendio related to the product. So I'm Robert Henschel. I work as a director at the Research Technologies Division at Indiana University. We started with ThinLinc as a product 5 or 6 years ago, specifically to help new users to our HPC clusters to get onto the machines, provide them a graphical user interface rather than the traditional shell-based user interface with then a batch system for them to run the actual jobs. So for us, the main focus of using ThinLinc is to really make it easier for people to get on board with running jobs on a centralized resource. It's hard enough for new users nowadays to deal with terminals. And then if you have to teach them how to do terminal and then how to do terminal remotely and use a batch system to run remote jobs, that's a very steep learning curve. So we've adopted ThinLinc to give them a desktop that's not quite the Windows or Mac OS desktop that they would love to see, but for us we use GNOME, and that's close enough for them, right? They get a graphical desktop, they can open a shell, and that's our main usage scenario. We have a few hundred users on the system every month, and have been very happy with it as well. So with this, I'll turn it over to Pierre to talk a little bit about his role as CTO.
Thank you. As Robert said, I'm since a couple of years, I'm the CTO and also the product owner of ThinLinc here at Cendio. So I'm currently the one that's in charge of getting things done, development side here. But I've been quite a long time at this company. I started in 2005 as a developer. So I'd like to think I have a pretty good technical grasp of ThinLinc. So today I'm here to give Cendio's view a bit on these questions, but also any technical questions that pops up, I should hopefully be able to answer and get things sorted.
Okay, thank you. Then, as I said earlier, we have about 3 different categories that we're gonna go through questions. User support needs are one, customization of ThinLinc and the Linux operating system that you make available. That's the second, and then security. So let's get started with on the user support side. The first question I have is, so tell us a little bit about the team that you have, or the number of people that provide end user support, and what kind of support are you providing? So I'll go first on this one. It gives the other panelists a little bit of chance to prepare those. At IU, we basically run the support for our ThinLinc product out of the same group that provides support for our standard HPC systems. So we have seen over the last couple of years an increase in questions about the product. Some of them questions that we hadn't dealt with in the past. So in the past, what we provided was support on HPC applications and then the Linux terminal. Of course, now you get questions about I'm running a Chinese version of the operating system and the character set is not working in ThinLinc, right? That's not a user support question that we used to get a lot. So we see some more of those. In general, it has led to a slight increase in support tickets on our side, but it also has led to an increase in users. So I think from our side, there's a good balance of the increased user support need that we have and the increased number of users that we've attracted with this. Then I'll turn it over to Anthony, maybe.
Yeah, so for us, I think the question is, what does our team look like? So the admin team ranges across the globe. There's locations, like Technicolor has multiple businesses that have multiple sites and multiple countries. So it's really a hard question for me to stay on top of, but it's multi-region, multi-company, and it's always scaling up and down as per the production demands. That's the way film works, that any film production, even on set, obviously you don't work unless there is a need for you to be there, and it's the same way for artists. So it's very variable. But I can't give you an exact figure as the admin team.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So what kind of stuff do I provide in terms of user support? I used to in my previous roles. I do not do that. I provide admin support, and for them it's kind of just like, oh, we're going to implement this new application, or we're going to change this, or we're doing an update for this, or I'll provide documentation and training. And if something really breaks, then I will jump in there to kind of troubleshoot what's going on. That's kind of the support side of things. Is there a follow-up question to that?
There wasn't a follow-up question. I may ask one though. Do you get a lot of question on usage of ThinLinc, or do you get more questions on usage of the products inside of ThinLinc that you expose?
It's what we've done. But the main use case right now is our internet VDI, and we've taken great lengths to make it as painless as possible. So there really isn't a lot the user needs to do in terms of managing the ThinLinc session. A lot of it's just kind of taken care of for them. So most of the questions will come around to like, oh, my Firefox profile is broken because I quit the application the wrong way, or some NFS thing happened. So it's mostly application level support. We don't get too many ThinLinc related questions.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, it's funny to say this, it sounds really big. We have a worldwide support team of 3 people to support, 400 to 500 engineers accessing ThinLinc from various portions of the world. It's difficult to get a good understanding of what the issues really are, because every issue involves ThinLinc in some aspect, right? They're utilizing the desktops. The desktops have some sort of interaction with the ThinLinc, and sometimes it's a terminal-related problem. Sometimes it's an X11-related problem. Sometimes it is strictly a user-based problem. But I think in general, ThinLinc becomes the main focus for the people that are working remotely. So our team is pretty good about troubleshooting or getting past whether or not it's the application that's causing the problem, or it is actually the desktop that is causing the problem. Most of the time we see administrative issues with connection drops and trying to reconnect to sessions that have been lost or really dropped because of the VPN, bandwidth and those types of things. So we have a small support team. Cendio is really the main focus on how the engineers get their jobs done every day. So it becomes, pretty much the first question that we ask the users: how are you using ThinLinc? What type of desktop are you using? And then try to move past it from there. For the most part, the issues really are desktop related. Like Robert was saying about the character set, we run into those things a lot with different applications, or character scaling that is hard to track down at times. But from an administrative support, we're able to do it with a fairly small team, which is a testament to how well the application seems to do for us.
Sounds good, thank you. Pierre, I'm going to skip you on this one, but give you a little bit more time on the next one, because I think I'll do a follow-up question. So on the customization side, as you both already said, I think ThinLinc offers the ability to both do publish desktops and publish just applications. How are you using this? Do you do both, or do you give users just the desktop? And then as a follow-up question, how much customization do you do, right? I'm not going to go first on this one, but I'll either Anthony or Craig, can one of you answer this?
I can take that and tell what we really do. As users go, users are fairly needy and they like a lot of verbosity to their tools, right? So trying to narrow their focus on what they can use would help from an administration standpoint, but it really is limiting to them. So what we try to do is publish 3 different desktop versions. Kind of the idea is there to really do a lightweight desktop for people that we can say, if your desktop's not performing right, you can run the lightweight desktop, which is XFCE. Or if you really love your graphics and you feel that your bandwidth is good, you can run KDE, and then kind of our go-to standard is GNOME. From a supportability standpoint, that just explodes the matrix that we have to support. So that is really difficult at times to do. But from the aspect of the users, if they've run into some sort of really big problem that we don't have enough bandwidth to address, we make them fall back to kind of our sweet spot, which is GNOME, and then work on customizations for them in that desktop. I think probably something to highlight for that, we just went through a big update, which is pretty big for us, but it's still behind the curve, of getting to the latest version of CentOS 7 and enabling GNOME extensions. And that has been quite a support matrix to try to get that to work, and still keep the performance of the login infrastructure up for all the Cendio connections.
So you are on GNOME 3 then?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And moving to the next version of GNOME has been challenging for us. Like you said earlier about character sets, making sure that we had all the right character sets, making sure that we had all the taskbar libraries and those types of things. We're seeing, issues with GNOME terminals and core performance, So I think really those are back-end stuff from, say, ThinLinc's X11 management, but we're still trying to solve some of those issues as they kind of crop up as we've jumped GNOME versions.
Are you doing a lot of customizations to those desktops? Or are you basically giving them what KDE or GNOME or XFCE provide?
We're not doing hardly any customization. We do some individual graphic stuff, splashing around some of our icons and those types of things. But really, we're trying to give what the OS gives to kind of simplify what we have to go through.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I'll go next for the IU view, and then I'll hand it to Anthony. So we only, Greg, you don't publish applications at all, right? Just desktops.
We don't publish any applications at this point.
Okay.
We, as a company, we're trying to move towards a more secure approach, maybe something towards what Anthony has gone through. But once we get to that point, I think it will be more about publishing those types of applications to get into a more secure environment. Okay,
thank you. So yeah, at Indiana University, we also only publish desktops. We actually only publish one, which is currently based on Mate. So it's a maintained but older version of the GNOME desktop. So that's the GNOME 2 code base going forward. We felt that from a performance point of view, that was the easiest for us to provide, because we don't really need the bells and whistles of the desktop. We want people to have a taskbar. We want people to pick applications. And when we moved to our current version of Red Hat, which is also 7, we did the migration from what was GNOME 2 to the now maintained Mate version, which involved some issues. But we do, so we did not feel we want to go down the support nightmare of allowing users to pick their own window manager. So we basically said, no more Mate it is, you're going to love it. But we did a number of customizations to the desktop that are related to the environment. So we provide a number of different file systems and things. So we put icons on the desktop for those home directories of users. We put some icons on the desktop for login shells to other HPC systems, so that you can immediately, if you log into our ThinLinc session, you are on one cluster, but if you want to use a different, or if you want to use our Cray machine, for example, you can double click a terminal and that'll immediately get you to the login node of that system. And then the team also has done a number of customizations on the applications that we provide, and some other convenience shell scripts that have an icon now that allow you to look at the queue of our batch system, things like that. One thing that has generated more support tickets is we have an icon on the desktop that basically opens up a little dialog where a person can ask a question, and then that'll immediately get routed to our support ticketing system. This has the consequence that people will ask you questions that are not terribly related to our ThinLinc setup, but are more related to the backend HPC systems. But it is a very low overhead way of allowing our users to submit questions. So it's a blessing and a curse, sort of at the same time. And then Anthony, what about you? And then Pierre, I'll hand it over to you to say something about general support. What kind of questions are you getting from your users?
So I want to say, it seems like you guys have done a lot more in terms of customizations and what you're offering. Like, I warned Pontus that our use case was very narrowly focused, so I might not have like a ton to offer up here. So again, for the most part, we just publish Firefox. There are some instances where we will publish a desktop, and we use Mate as well. That's our default desktop environment. It's really gives you that GNOME 2 feel while still being maintained in the CentOS branches. And I think the one use case where we actually will have a desktop is for, we have these dedicated machines at each location, and we use those as a means of getting a graphical interface if you need it. So sometimes a lot of our staff that are less comfortable on the shell and they need to access data somewhere else, or they need to execute a job, they will log into ThinLinc and they get like an exact copy of what they would normally get on their own machine, like their profile will load. So there's not too much in terms of customization. Yeah, it's mainly just publishing that Firefox for the internet access. And actually, there's one use case where, again, on the internet VDI cluster, there is sometimes a need for users to want to have multiple windows. So if they want like a shell and they want Firefox, obviously with ThinLinc, when you publish an app, you just get that app. You can't, there's no multi-window support when you just publish an app. So for that, I edited our wrapper scripts for Internet VDI. And if you request the desktop argument, I can't remember exactly what it is, but if you request that argument, you'll get an open box desktop. It's very stripped down. It's just like blank desktop with the wallpaper, and you can right click open shell and launch Firefox. It's very, very basic, but that'll serve the purpose of the multi-window needs. And yeah, I think that's really it in terms of the different use cases.
Okay, thanks so much. Pierre, so what do you, basically sort of the same question, but from a Cendio point of view, what kind of support requests are you seeing? What do you infer that users do with the product on this in the area of publishing desktop versus apps and customizations?
To be very honest, I don't think we've ever gotten any questions on this theme. Most of the questions that actually end up in our support are new users that are unfamiliar with ThinLinc and need help getting things up and running. I'd say that's the vast majority of our support issues. Questions from guys like you who are up and running and need help. Those are fairly rare and are usually more future feature requests and things like that.
So you want more questions from your users?
We'll take it as a sign that things work well for everybody.
Okay.
But as far as the application publishing, it's very rarely questions on that. Could also be because we don't emphasize that portion of the product very much, and that's on purpose, I'd say, because as Anthony says, it's not really a application publishing in the terms that probably other vendors would view it, where you have support for multiple windows and things like that. So we have the function, but it's not quite as polished as a company that maybe that's their main feature. For Cendio and ThinLinc, it's full desktop is the prime use case, even though application publishing is possible.
Okay. Something just changed here. That's weird. Before I move on to the security question, let me just ask one question. To Craig and Anthony, do you make use of the ability for end users to have multiple sessions within ThinLinc? So we started with this at IU, and then found that users are more confused by basically when they reconnect, right? And they get a dialogue that says, hey, do you want to connect to your existing session, or do you want to get a new one? So we quickly disabled that feature, which helped us cut down on support requests. And also, we did never have a request where a person was like, I want multiple sessions in ThinLinc because I want to do different things. We offer the virtual desktops in GNOME so people can separate their work. But I was wondering if you see a use for that.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that first. The general idea is no, we don't do that. Even back before we used ThinLinc, it was always one of those things that would cause people issues. Let me explain a little bit about how it would work. So say we have one of the offices in Vancouver, and people have to sometimes go to other spots around the building to meet with people or talk to people. So they'll log in at a free workstation, and they'll want to launch ThinLinc for internet. And then they'll log out, they'll forget about it, it'll time out, and they'll go back to the original desk. And then because certain applications lock files, like Firefox, for example, the profile gets locked. So they go back to the original computer and like, oh, I can't launch Firefox, my profile's locked. It's because they left it open somewhere else and they don't remember where it is. So it's just not worth having multi-session. What we've done is we just reconnect that session, and that's worked out pretty good. But again, we also have an idle timeout as well. We don't want people hogging out resources for no reason. So I can't remember the exact interval, but at a certain point, it'll just kill that session.
Craig, do you want to chime in, or?
Okay, well, I like how you guys narrow the scope that I can't seem to narrow. We support multiple desktops, and I tried to, in our recent OS upgrade, out of the box, the configuration is to only support a single connection, right? So under the covers, I updated all the ThinLinc, I call them brokers, but where everybody goes to get their desktops distributed, kind of the high availability model that you guys have. It quickly became apparent from the number of tickets that I generated from the user community that they want and needed the multiple desktops in our environment. What the engineers seem to do is they will run a desktop related to whatever product they're working on, and then configure all the windows and all the flow based to that. So they will know that, DisplayPort, pick a number, is related to, this particular project's work. They'll switch out and go to another desktop for the other projects, and they can segment their work that way. Obviously, within GNOME, you could kind of do that, but they like to have multiple interactive sessions going to the HPC cluster, and it's just a nice way that they feel that they can get that separation between different phases of the work. So it's become kind of an integral part of how they do their design.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of how I had envisioned our users would use multiple sessions, and I was proven completely wrong making that assumption. Okay, so on the security side, I have one question. I assume that your institution and companies have security teams that work with you when you make new services available. And have you seen more pushback from those teams for providing something like ThinLinc than you would, for example, providing just HPC login nodes? I can go first on this from the IU side. So we have, when we all work with the University Security Office, then we were very happy to find that the communication is basically over SSH, right? Since our HPC login nodes only expose SSH to begin with, getting ThinLinc into the security setup was rather straightforward. So for us, it was a huge help that it was not yet another protocol that needs an open port, but tunneling that through SSH was very helpful for us. Craig, Anthony, what's your take?
It's funny, I had the exact opposite reaction. I was like, oh dear God, it uses SSH. No, there's so many, SSH is such a can of worms. Like it's a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful means of transferring data. Yeah, just like there's so many security related issues with SSH. And it was quite a challenge to secure it while maintaining functionality. And I think Pierre and I had gone back and forth a few times on that. So a general recommendation or some feedback, some guidance, what I'd like to see in the future would be that maybe if some of these security related things could be defined or automated in some way, like maybe the install wizard says, hey, if you need a low security environment, run this. If you need a high security, run this, or medium, run this. Just more standardization and more explanation of the implications of having SSH running for the session, because there is a lot of things that you have to consider. Yeah, was there a follow-up? That
was fine. Right? So basically, you did not have SSH available before.
Again, because we're trying to air gap production systems from internet-facing systems. You see the problem with that, right?
Yeah.
You're going to allow SSH to a system that has internet, and you're trying to do secure environment. It's just not a good mix. So we really have to control that SSH config as tightly as possible. And it's not straightforward. So if that could be documented in a better way or made easier for users, I think that'd be a very handy thing to have.
Okay. Yeah, we had been down the SSH rabbit hole because that was our main way for people to get onto our clusters. So,
and I assume you just have a flat network with no differing security policies. Everyone's on the same VRF, there's no like firewall in between the
we actually have our research systems outside, so we have them in a DMC, but our research system are outside the campus. So they are more exposed to the internet than any of our other research, our business systems or the learning systems are. We do that mostly from a performance point of view. We run systems like Globus and other file transfer utilities that you don't really want to run that through a deep packet inspection firewall and then get it bogged down to hundreds of megabits when we want hundreds of gigabits of connection. So for us, that's not uncommon in places of higher education to basically have those systems outside the firewall for performance reasons. So we have to watch SSH to begin with, right? So if we have to master that part, and then having Cendio tunnel it through for us was easy, which I guess is like 180-degree difference from what you have.
Yes.
Greg, how does this look on your side?
I hear what Anthony's saying because I'm starting to run a project, and we've utilized the SSH function to maximize our users' ability to run the tool. It's fantastic, right? The IT governance stuff says that inside of our company says I need to run securely, and being able to run over SSH is fantastic. Our security infrastructure has changed a little bit, and now it used to be years ago, I would have all the engineers' machines out in the field, right? And then I've slowly moved that infrastructure into the data center. Now we're starting to whitelist access points in the data center firewalls, right? So being port 22 access is pretty great because it's really hard to whitelist SSH. My next phase is that we want to put all of our design environments inside a DMZ, inside of our internal network. To do that is fairly easy if we say only SSH gets into our environment. But the fact that SSH is so powerful is kind of my Achilles heel. I can open one port into the environment, but that one port is so powerful that I can't control all the other interactions that users could, exfiltrate data using it, and the list goes on and on. So I kind of see that from Anthony's perspective, because I'm just about ready to step into that, and probably some direction from you guys at Cendio to say, this is what our customers have done for security, and some sort of sketch related to that would really help as companies try to get more secure to dealing with what we all thought in the beginning was as doing this, SSH tunneling for the desktops was great. But like Anthony said, it does kind of open up a can of worms when you try to get security to the next level.
Well, that's a great segue. I'll turn it over to Pierre then to say what he thinks about that.
Yeah, I love the fact that we have sort of both sides of this represented here, because this is, of course, not a new question to us. It's something we've heard pretty much since day one, and we've had people on both sides since basically day one. That people like Robert just says that it's great that it's SSH. We've already vetted that. We already have SSH. It's fantastic. We don't have to open something new. And people who are concerned about all the capabilities of SSH, and they'd like something more very specific and lock things down. So yeah, it's something we've discussed many times, and since we have customers on both sides, we haven't really changed anything so far. What we have done is update the documentation on some things you can do to lock down SSH. I don't know if Anthony, if you've seen this one. It's something a couple of years back we added that documentation on how to avoid giving users shell access via SSH, how to lock down some of the port forwarding, and some things like that to make sure that get rid of some of the functionality of SSH and still allow ThinLinc to operate properly. And in case you haven't found it, I can probably send a link here in the.
No, I've seen the documents. It should be very clear, like maybe in the installer even, it's like pre-configure some of these things to help admins out and warn them that, hey, if your environment requires some kind of security, you should probably use this or read this.
Yeah, and so far we've sort of stayed a bit away from it. It's another can of worms, and if nothing else, where different customers tend to draw the line at different points of what kind of what's enough. Should a clipboard still be allowed, or can there be restrictions on resolutions or things like that? we had one customer that wanted to allow local printers, but they wanted to make sure that the resolution of the prints was not that very high. So we gave them some tips on how to reconfigure cups to do this. And so it tends to vary a bit exactly what is considered okay and what isn't.
Okay, thank you. Let me remind the audience that if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll get to them. And then also thanks to the panelists for being brief in their answers. I think this has allowed us really to tackle a number of questions, so that's great. Back on the sort of user support / administration side, how was your experience installing ThinLinc, both initially and then if you make upgrades to go from version to version? Have you seen issues with that? How does it integrate into your standard Linux build if you have one? I'm not going to, I can't provide too much of that from the Indiana University side since I'm not on the system administration side. I know that we've had some issues integrating, for example, two-factor authentication, but that was as much an issue with the way how we do two-factor as it was with the way how Cendio expects two-factor to work. But that aside, I don't think we've seen any issues upgrading between the versions. So it's, I would say
I can speak to a little bit of that. I mean, it's nothing too crazy. So I've never had any issues installing it whatsoever. It's been completely painless. That's just great. And as far as how we manage it, it's just, we use Salt Stack to manage our servers. And again, it just integrates just fine. We've never had a problem with updates. It's been very painless. I know from the past when we've done other solutions, alternative competing products, that has been more of a challenge. But yeah, compared to other solutions, it's like you can't lose. It's so easy to install. So yeah, nothing but good things to say about that.
Craig, is this something you can speak to, or?
I think I'll just echo what Anthony said there. It's the install process is pretty easy. It takes care of a lot of the details. I have, at times I have new admins, right? And I just had a brand new admin. And I said, you need to go and stand up a Cendio server and a couple of agents related to that server. Here's how you go and do it, and contact me if you have any problems, right? It's kind of point and shoot, which is fantastic. I don't have a lot of, steep learning curve for the admins to go and figure it out. The customization is kind of straightforward from that standpoint. So yeah, nothing really other than, good feedback to say about that process.
Okay. There was a question in chat whether you use the automatic configuration migration option in the installer when you do the upgrades, or if you do it differently. That's nothing I can speak to, so I'll let that to Greg and Anthony to answer if you can.
I'll take that one first. We just use the automatic installer to get the initial config on there. Then we usually go in and make a couple customization settings that we normally go and do, right? For these are the agents, these are the just general settings like that. But for the most part, there is just the no customization process in the install for us.
And when you do an upgrade, do you do the migration? So you basically just reinstall or install over the existing product?
We usually do a full install again because when we actually get to a point of where we're ready to kind of take the environment to another level, we kind of build a whole nother infrastructure because we want to go through a test process between all the changes that we do. Cendio is only one piece of that process that we got to go through a test, right? So it's easier to duplicate the environment, run the flow through, and make sure that everything's correct, and then kind of get the users to move to the new environment. And then we go back and dismantle the previous version.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for us, we generally don't update too often. But what I can tell you is we don't use the installer. we just update the salt scripts and then push it out. And it's great that the I think it's a TL-setup command. It'll take an unattended configuration file, which will just pipe that through. So yeah, there's no need to do a graphical installer. And we upgrade very infrequently unless there's an actual security issue or a feature we need to get out there, because it's hard to secure a production downtime and it's hard to coordinate globally. So it's one of those things that for upgrading it, it's really has to be an important issue.
That's great, Anthony. You already answered the second question in chat. That's fantastic. So, Pierre, from your point of view, can you speak to the mix between like installation related tickets and configuration related tickets? Is that something to contribute here?
I think we rarely have well, it's a gray zone. I think most, as I mentioned earlier, most of the questions are for new users, and I think the thing that trips most of them up is the whole sort of dual layer architecture of ThinLinc with masters and agents, and configuring the host names properly and making sure clients can reach agents and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if that falls into the installation part or the configuration, but for existing customers, I think I don't remember last we have had any issues around and questions around installation. Not since we added the automation support. That was a very popular question before we could automate the setup phase, and people had to do various hacky scripts to get around that thing and automate it. But now it's been quiet.
Okay. Back to the customization side. Do you use the feature that ThinLinc offers to have those thin drives where you can basically map a directory on your local machine to appear on the published desktop? And is this something that you actively promote with your users, or do you have no need to this because all the data is within a central provided file system anyway, and people are not supposed to export things to their end user machines? Greg?
Out of the box, I think that configuration is there. We don't necessarily want that, right? It just creates a really nice area for people to get data in and out of the environment, which is really comfortable for them, which is really bad for us from a security standpoint. So we've been in the new environment that we just, built, and we've moved 400 people to that. We've started to see that that config was kind of there, and it's not working properly. If it was working properly, we would see the drives and notice that we need to go back and fix that. Something is missing in that environment, and it's actually causing the back-end Linux machines to hang. So we've gone through and done our best to take that functionality out of our environment to get rid of that. Mapping between the PC environment and the UNIX environment, there's issues doing that anyways, but also having these devices hanging off a VPN with variable bandwidth to the back-end infrastructure causes a bunch of other issues as well, right? So the best thing for us, if you're not really just focusing on security, is to really decouple that process to basically improve the user's experience when they're inside the environment.
Are you providing a different way then for people, or if you were to do that, right, would you provide a different way for people to ingest data into those desktops then?
So my obstinance to that process is well known in my community, but I do not like to have data outside of my environment. I don't put up huge walls for that. If my users are advanced enough and know how to get that data out for some particular engineering reason, I'll support it. But for the most part, I don't tell people how to get the data out. Typically, if they have to get it out, we use some sort of graphical SCP tool to pull it out and maybe do some sort of other analysis on the data and then put the data back. But I guess that has just kind of been our way to control keeping the data inside the environment. Like I said, we're going to the kind of the next phase where we want to make sure that nothing gets out of the environment. So it boils back to that kind of SCP, problem where ThinLinc is going to use port 22 and SCP is going to use port 22. And if I turn on port 22 for ThinLinc, then somebody can SCP out of that environment. So to answer your question, really, we try not to support any type of data movement out of the environment. It's there just by nature of having port 22 open. But even though the tool provides some really fancy ways to do that, we want to kind of pull that functionality out of the tool to try to keep the data as contained as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. For us, it is a convenience way for our users to basically transfer data from their local workstations or their laptops to the central compute systems. There are certainly other ways for our users to do that, but we've found that mapping a drive is relatively straightforward for people once they have the initial setup going. What we struggle with a little bit is just every now and then we get support tickets that says, hey, I disconnected my ThinLinc session and my application doesn't run anymore. Yes, because your input data set is on a thin drive, right? If you close the application, the connection to your data goes away. So, and this is something in general, running something like MATLAB or SAS against a data set that has very variable bandwidth is a problem. So it's kind of both for us. It is nice if we could get users to really just use it as an egress or ingest tool where we could get people to copy the data to the central system or even copy them out, but don't run MATLAB against a script that is located on a ThinLinc connection. So I don't know if there is Pierre, I don't think there's a good way to actually accomplish this, right? I mean, once you map it, you can't really stop users from abusing the connection, right? It's
not to my knowledge, no. It's something we've heard before, yeah. Mostly from specifically the HPC crowd, but I guess you guys have larger data files than many others, and specifically this users don't realize how much slower access is for thin drives and is compared to something that's actually local on the ThinLinc server. So. But we don't have any recommendation on how to force users to just copy and don't actively access it. No, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. Do you see any, the thin drives are a well-supported feature, right? Pierre, you're not.
Sorry, I didn't get that last part.
The thin drives are a well-supported feature. You are not getting rid of those in the future.
No. We're not. We are sort of questioning how high it should be on our priority list, though. because most of the customers we've talked to recently say they use it little or not at all. I think the primary reason we've heard so far is that most of them have either don't want that kind of data flow, or they are using different kind of cloud storage like Dropbox or things like that for their users. So they have no need for this functionality. So we don't have any plans to remove it as things stand right now, but it's also difficult to prioritize any further development since the feedback we're getting, it's rarely used. But we try to base our plans on feedback. So if we hear a lot of customers saying that this is something we really like, so then we'll put more effort into it. Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And I think Anthony had to leave, so we'll it's just the three of us on the panel here. Before I go to, or let's actually address, there was one question in chat, which I think we've talked about it, but the question is ThinLinc as a product used to basically replace end user workstations, or is this something that is used on a for just temporary connections to the central compute systems or lab environments? I'll take that for us. So for us, it's really, we do not use it to replace end user workstations. We sometimes make that argument with research groups on campus, for example, where we say, yes, you can buy a dedicated workstation to running MATLAB, for example, or bigger Linux applications, or you could run this on our central, what we call our ThinLinc installation is called the research desktop. So we do not we do encourage people to run their compute heavy jobs in our batch system, but we will allow people to run multi-core applications right on the agent nodes. So we have provisioned our environment a little bit larger than we probably needed it to be, so that we can get people the convenience of basically double-clicking MATLAB and then being able to run a 5 or 10 core application right on those nodes. So this wouldn't prevent people from buying their own workstations, but it certainly is a nice way to get to a standard environment. Right? If you are happy with the Linux that we provide, the applications that we provide, there's no need for you to duplicate that in a lab, for example. But we do not see it as a temporary way. For us, it's the main way to access those systems. Craig, I think it's very similar to you, right? I mean, you're not making end user desktops obsolete with this.
Actually, it's a little bit different, Robert. When I first started using thin desktops, and even today, that my argument has been that when I have 400 engineers, I don't want to support that type of infrastructure at their desktops, right? And my argument really has been, and over time it's proven out, is that I can focus the capital investment for those systems into a centralized resource, right? To do that, I can reduce my support staff as well. And I get to more of a consistent environment, which is one thing you touched on, Robert. So for us, it really has been a way to centralize our resources and get rid of the kind of system at the user level, right? So we've been able to collapse that whole infrastructure into the data centers for each of our sites. And when I first started this job and we first started using a thin client before we shifted to Cendio, this was kind of the argument. I went from, what was it, 100, somewhere close to 100 different desktop systems, collapsed into an infrastructure of 15 login nodes, right? So I was able to provide enough bandwidth with 15 machines back in the data center connected to the HPC environment, right? And reduce all that system work underneath the desktop for not only my desktop guys, but also from a capital perspective. I didn't have to go through and refresh those machines.
Yeah.
So
and then
it's a little bit different from our aspect.
Yeah, no, I agree that it's different. Are you then, when users launch the chip design applications you talked about, is that something that they do on the login nodes, or do you have them configured so that they automatically run out of the batch system then?
They're all, everything that they launch, other than trying to control web browsers and those types of things, is really submitted to the backend HPC environment, right? ThinLinc is really just pushing pixels at that point.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is our configuration. There is a little different. We have a little bit more than 20 machines serving the ThinLinc environment, for the reason that we have over-provisioned it to allow people to do computation right on those machines. So our ThinLinc cluster is a submit host for our HPC machine, for our Linux throughput cluster. And as I said earlier, you can easily double-click and get onto our Cray machine as well. And the file systems that we provide are the same on all of those. But for convenience purposes, we really want people to do some work, like some visualization work with ParaView, or some console work, or MATLAB on those login nodes right away. On the other side, we do monitor that usage, right? It creates some support work on our side, where if a user is really in there and using 90% of the cores, then we reach out to them and say, look, don't do that, and then help them run this in the batch system. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end here. Pierre, is there anything from your side that you wanted to ask, maybe? And then I'll extend the same to Greg if there are questions from your side.
Nothing offhand. So I think I've gotten a clearer picture as is of what you guys are doing out there in the real world.
Okay, Craig, anything from your side?
No, I don't have anything from my side. I think it's nice to hear the community. Robert, you and I have similar jobs, right? To understand we're not too dissimilar means that I'm pointed in the right direction, which is really nice to hear. I'm sure that other people on the call are probably getting the same kind of feedback, that they're using the application as it was intended, and probably getting the same mileage out of it that we are. I think from this panel, being able to meet Pierre and you guys has really helped me out, and it'll probably generate a lot more questions that I feel would be good to probably push out into the community as well, from a maybe not only a use case perspective, but security, like Anthony was talking about.
Yeah, I certainly very much feel the same, and the panel is sort of a follow-on to the webinar series that Cendio had organized last year with a few institutions in the US and in Europe to present their view of how they use the product. And I think, and Gene could probably speak to that, I think those videos are linked in the support forum, right? So if any of the participants wants to see some of the more use cases, I believe we have those available.
Yes, Robert, that's right. The videos are available on our YouTube channel, and as well in the community. So in the community, it's a little bit more organized with some hashtags and also with a better description. So we invite all to check there at community.thinlinc.com.
Okay, thank you. And in general, if any of the participants has other ideas of how to keep this going, as Craig said, I find it valuable to maybe once a month or every other month have a conversation with people who do similar things at their institution. I think it helps all of us better understand the product and better use it. And if it helps Cendio better understand their customers, it helps them better serve them. So I think this could be potentially a win-win for both sides. which I think is a long-winded way of me wrapping this up, which means I'll return it back to Jean for the final word.
As the schedule suggested, we would have a space now for Q&A. The questions, they were asked also during the panel. So please feel free now to ask any questions remaining. I invite you, all the audience, to post questions either in the chat, or if you want to open the microphone and make it directly, please feel welcome to do that.
So there's one question in chat, which I'm sure either Pierre or Jean can address, just posting a link to what is ThinDrives. I'll just quickly say it's basically an ability to get, it's an ability for the native client. So you need to have the Windows, Linux, or macOS client installed, not the HTML5 client in the browser. If you use ThinLinc through the native clients, you can basically map any one of your local folders on your workstation, basically the device that you make the connection to ThinLinc to, and make that appear on the published desktop, which allows you to import and export files.
Yes, precisely as Robert says. I'm looking through here. I'm not sure if we have a good sort of overview documentation. I don't know, John, do you know if we have anything on the web page? I'm looking at the product documentation. It's more technical details of how to configure it and how to do all the different settings. So it's not a very good overview of the function. But as Robert says, it's basically get access to your local files, if it's a thumb drive or if it's your documents folder on your local client or anything else, to make sure you can reach those files from inside your ThinLinc session.
Eric, is your question answered properly? Okay, great. Thank you. Any more questions?
Look at this, 100% customer satisfaction right there.
You are welcome to ask your questions now, either by the chat or if you want to open the microphone, feel free to do that.
And if not, we're done here.
Yes, last call, and then, yes. Well, so thank you, all of you, for attending this webinar. Thank you for all the panelists, special, and Robert for moderating it. We are grateful for all your presence here, and we hope you had a good session. We also want to invite you, in case you want to present your ideas, you are welcome to join the community and share your thoughts and feedback with us. So we have the link, it's not in the slide, but community.thinlinc.com as shared in the chat, and also feel free to write contact@cendio.com for any need. Thank you very much.